Hello and welcome to the Rags Designer Suite. Today I'd like to show you the basic introduction to the Rags Designer and also some basic things you can do on the General tab. This is a very high-level introduction, so let's get started. What you see here is the Rags Designer screen as it first comes up. Everything is pretty much blank. This is the blank new game format that you'll see. Let's do one thing real quick and verify the version of the Rags Designer. You do this by clicking on the Help button, then click About. You'll see we're using version 1.2, which is the latest version as of this recording. Now, a simple way to get started with Rags and create a framework game is click File, New, and you're presented with the Create a New Game menu. You can create the blank game, which is what we currently have. You can create a simple 2-room game with a slightly larger, it's actually a 4-room demo game. We're going to just start with a simple 2-room game. Click Create Game, and you'll notice a few things have changed on this screen. We have a game title and an opening message, which you can add to as you see fit. Here's a little sample. There we go. On the Rooms tab below, we're just going to go over this very briefly. You'll see there's a beginning room and destination room. These are our 2 rooms in our game. In the beginning room, if you click on the exits, you can see going north from the beginning room will lead us to the destination room. If we look at the destination room, going south from that room will take us back to the beginning room. On the Player tab, you'll see we've assigned the player to start at the beginning room. So let's go back to the General tab, and let's go ahead and run this and see what happens. We'll click Tools, Debug Current Game, and the game should start up here. Let's give it a name, Tutorial 1. Okay, so let me move this into our field of view here. The debug data form that you see here, we'll go over a little later once we get into some more advanced Rags concepts. For now, I'm just going to minimize that, and we can view the Rags player. You can see we are currently in the beginning room. Here's the title of the game and the opening message and the room description that we're in. So right now all we can do in our game is go north, which takes us to the destination room, and we can go south, which takes us back to the beginning room. So it's a very basic game, but it's a good framework to get you going if you've never done Rags development before. Let's go back here and look at some of the features on the General tab and go through them all real quick. The game title, that's fairly obvious. The password protect this game. What this will do is if you turn it on and fill in a password, that will lock your game file so that your players won't be able to open your game up in the designer and see what all the puzzles are and how to solve them. If it doesn't bother you, just leave that unchecked. The game font, this will change the default game font on the player. So if we go here and select, something a little crazy here, Mistral 16, we click OK, and then we debug our game, you should see that we now have that font playing in the player. Now one thing to keep in mind, if you use a non-standard font and the player who's playing the game does not have that font installed on their system, Rags will revert back to the standard font. So let's go ahead and show you how the player can override your selection anyway. So you're not guaranteed that the font you select will always display on the player screen, but it may. So initial background music, Rags can now do multimedia as of version 1.2. You can select any sort of music that's playable through a Windows Media Player. You can also loop that background music so that it will keep playing and playing. Down here on the player display options, these are kind of interesting. You can actually hide the main display picture, you can use inline images, and hide the portrait display. So what did that do? Well, that basically turned Rags into a much more text-based system. So let's go ahead and run it. And you'll see now, as soon as I pull this into our field of view, We don't have an image box. We don't have a player portrait. But what will happen is if you do want to display pictures, they will display inline mixed in with your text now. Some people like that, some people don't. If you like text-based adventures, this is a better way to use RAGs. But I prefer the standard format, so let's go back here. Now this last item here is the status bar. You can add status bar items and give them a name. Your status bars usually keep track of player health information, their name, that sort of thing. So we're just going to fill in a standard one. We'll say the player's name is Bobby. So that should show up in our status bar at the bottom. Let's go ahead and run this and see what happens. And you'll notice we're back to the standard RAGs player format, and we have in our status bar item name Bobby. So that's great. The last thing I'd like to cover is the author info tab. The author can fill in their name. They can fill in the version of their game file. They can keep track of versions this way. Game information. You can also put all sorts of text and messaging that you'd like in here. So what that does is, let's go back and run our game. And from the player, you will see under, let's see, I believe help, game info. This will display all of that information we just typed in, the game information, so you can track your versions this way, have some game information displayed there. So those are the items I'd like to cover in the General tab, and for the next tutorial we'll talk about the rooms. Thank you.